300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Happy to have you with me on a lovely Memorial Day, Monday, May 31st, and the NBA playoffs are in full swing. A lot to get into. Teams are tied 2-2. Certain teams are up 3-1. So long to the Miami Heat. Sorry, you had a great run last year. Unfortunately, it's over this year. But what a start to a Sunday morning with the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. We have to start there. And CP3 says he's back. He says, hey, Monty Williams, why don't you take a seat on the bench where you're supposed to be as the coach? Play me in this ball game. And he did that. He nixed Monty Williams' decision. And boy, was that a good one, because the Phoenix Suns needed all of Chris Paul on his shoulders, however healthy or not healthy they were. They collected a huge road win to even up this series 2-2 against the Lakers, winning 100-92. And this is the thing. We knew Chris Paul's impact was profound on this Phoenix Suns team. I, for one, had him as a top 5 MVP candidate this year. And that says a lot, given not only his stature, not only his age, but again, the impact that he has had from every single franchise that he's gone to. There's no question Chris Paul is a transcendent talent, and more importantly, a transcendent leader. The way that he orchestrates this offense, this Phoenix Suns team, their offense was a completely different team with him on the floor. The way he was orchestrating the offense and engineering different buckets and passes. Jay Crowder dropped 17. DeAndre Ayton, 14 points, 17 rebounds. But Chris Paul with 18 points and 9 assists. He was that calming presence that the Phoenix Suns needed. And clearly they play much more confidently with him on the floor than without him. Again, they're a different team with him than they are without him. And I don't want to take away any of his heroics or any of the leadership that he displayed. Because the Phoenix Suns, the bottom line is they're a young team. They needed to win this game to keep this season alive for them, this series alive, and they did that. And mad credit to them for accomplishing that road feat. But this is the reality. Let's be honest. If you were watching that game, if Anthony Davis doesn't get injured, the Lakers go up 3-1 and they win this game. I'm sorry. That's the reality. That's the truth. Because in the 2 previous games that Anthony Davis played, he drops 34 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game. And they win both of those games. So now you've got a tie series 2-2. You also have Anthony Davis, who suffered a groin strain. That's a couple days after he sprained his left knee, about a month removed from returning from a major Achilles injury and another calf strain. And this is the knock on AD. He's just a bit brittle and fragile. And I love Anthony Davis as a talent, but as an NBA fan, watching him play every single time he falls onto the court, falls to the floor, I'm holding my breath, knocking on wood. I have some wood around me. I knock on wood and pray that this isn't a major career-ending injury, because that's the reaction that you have every single time you watch Anthony Davis fall to the floor and crumble to the ground. And so that's been the difference in these two games, is that I appreciate the hell out of Anthony Davis for laboring through injuries, especially since he has joined the Lakers and since he's joined LeBron. And I think that that's a big influence, is LeBron's influence on playing through injuries. But at the same time, this is kind of the reality of Anthony Davis, is he's always seemingly battling through little nicks and knacks and injuries. He's never 100% healthy. And you add on top of that, KCP missed the entire game due to a hyperextended leg injury that he sustained in game 3. And these are some major absences. And of course, right on cue to start the third quarter, that's when Phoenix pulled away. It's as if the Lakers got the notification Anthony Davis is out for the remainder of the game, and then stopped playing basketball for the first 5 or so minutes of the third quarter. And that's when Phoenix extended their lead to 14. They held the Lakers to 15 points on 3 of 16 shooting in the third quarter. In the third quarter, the Lakers scored 15 points barely. So neither team has shot particularly well in this series as a whole. We know that. And I think a lot of the credit has to go to both teams' defensive plans. But unfortunately, this series will be defined by injuries on both sides. Obviously, Chris Paul laboring through his own shoulder injuries, the Lakers having their own litany of injuries, and really a spate of injuries all happening very quickly. Again, Anthony Davis gone for the second half, will likely, now that it was listed, they listed him as day-to-day, but they said he suffered a grade 1 groin strain. He will likely miss game 5, and even if he plays in game 6 or game 7, if it potentially goes to that, he won't be near 100%. KCP missed the entire game. That's just, and then LeBron James, of course, you forget he's recovering from a high ankle sprain. This is LeBron James in year 18, age 36, having to carry the load, and that's the big takeaway here, is this is LeBron's time. We've been waiting for it. We've been delaying it. We've been postponing it. We've been hoping that, quite frankly, he didn't have to muster that type of performance up this early in the first round. But it's come to that. That's the thing, is LeBron hasn't been required up until this point in the series to take over. And it is right now LeBron's time to take over. He said it's time for him to take over. That's what these shoulders are built for. Heavy's the head that wears the crown. This is who LeBron is. And to whom much is given, much is required. He understands that. But the difference was LeBron hadn't had to exert that much energy and summon up those types of performances yet. We've yet to see one of those LeBron-type games of 35 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, shooting 60% from the floor. We haven't seen one of those because he hasn't needed to summon up one of those performances. He still dropped 25 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists yesterday. And he had some incredible highlight dunks. That alley-oop off the backboard from Alex Caruso showed a little brief snapshot and snippet of LeBron's athleticism that he still has, that he, again, had been reticent to show up until this point. But when I look at the Lakers, here's the only good news if you're the Lakers. You can still rely on your defense, even without Anthony Davis, to collect some wins here. The Lakers have had the number 1 defense in the NBA all season, and I think that even without Anthony Davis for this series, again, not a championship, but for this series, LeBron can still carry you combined with the defense, but it has to be everything. You have to have the defense, and you have to have LeBron playing at an extremely high level. Schroeder can't give you 8 points. No other starter scored in double figures in this game. No other starter outside of LeBron. Kuzma's been hot and cold. Yes, I know it technically said he dropped 11 points. That's not nearly enough, and his usage will have to increase, especially given the absence of Anthony Davis. So this is a really good Phoenix Suns team, and more importantly, a really deep Phoenix Suns team that they're showing. They aren't afraid to challenge the Lakers. This is not a team that is scared. They didn't feel scared coming into Staples Center. I would say that they were a little bit overwhelmed at the end of game 3 with both Anthony Davis and LeBron out on the floor, asserting their dominance. I could tell they were a little bit overwhelmed without Chris Paul, but that was their first road playoff game. I think those jitters are over. And now you look at this Phoenix Suns team, you're going back to Phoenix and you won by 8 points on the road, which again, that's big, but that was without Anthony Davis in the second half, without KCP, who's the primary ball handler, ball defender against either Booker or Payne or Chris Paul. And I just think that right now, this series is teetering. It's really just about which team will be healthier or healthy enough by the end of the series. Because what we know is championships so often rely on good health, just good fortune. Are you fortunate enough to have good health? That's what we saw last year in the bubble. And the Lakers have just been decimated by injuries this whole season. Just absolutely decimated by injuries this entire season, and now it sets up a pivotal game 5 on the road in Phoenix that I think will just be an all-time gutsy, gritty performance by both teams. I think both teams will come out with that desire and with that passion. It's just about execution. Will the magnitude of that moment in game 5 at Phoenix, will it swell up and consume and engulf the Lakers, or will it engulf the Suns? And now again, it's just been a dogfight. And now potentially 2 of the last 3 games could be played in Phoenix. Can't wait to see what happens, but both teams need to be healthy. And this is just, again, bad news if you're the Lakers to lose Anthony Davis, but you still have enough, in my opinion, to finish the job. But we'll see. Speaking of teams that were in dire situations, and all of a sudden, the script and the narrative has shifted 360 degrees. Los Angeles Clippers, the other team in LA that was in the opposite boat of the Lakers, they went on the road to Dallas trailing 0-2. Trailing 0-2. And they come back this Monday, and it's an even series 2-2. This Clippers team, it's mind-boggling to me. I've been a fan of the NBA and of basketball for so long. I've never witnessed a team that is quite as complex and impossible to identify and understand than the Clippers. I can't do it. They're the ultimate enigma. This is the ultimate Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team. It's puzzling because you look at this team and my immediate reaction was, well, where were these performances in game 1 and game 2 when you're at home? And I understand, and I'm going to touch on the Luka injury and the Mavericks, but it just befuddles me how the Clippers all of a sudden decided to start playing basketball on the road with their backs against the wall. And I understand that the main difference was the shooting disparity, how the Mavericks in the first 2 games in LA were unbelievable, shooting it over 50%, over 52% in game 2 from the 3-point line, and that they were essentially ice cold in game 4. They shot 5 of 30 from the 3-point line last night, the Dallas Mavericks. So I understand that plays a role, but a big reason for those missed shots was that the defensive intensity for the Clippers ratcheted up. They were a lot more dialed in. They were a lot more locked in and focused. They contested shots. They were active with their hands defensively. And for the meantime, they've quashed any of these concerns about this team. And a lot of times we question them, we question their backbone because we hadn't seen them do it yet in the postseason. And this is the first time that we saw the Clippers truly with their backs against the wall, and they rolled up their sleeves and got the job done. And again, it just makes me take a step back and say, this is the team that we were expecting to see right from the get-go. This was the team that we were expected to potentially reach the Western Conference Finals last year, potentially reach the Western Conference Finals this year. If they play like that, yeah, they've got a great chance. This is a better all-around team than the Dallas Mavericks, and even the addition of Rajon Rondo is finally visible with this group in the postseason. He played great. Kawhi Leonard has been fantastic on the road, and really just this entire series, but especially the past two games, he's been much more aggressive and assertive. Paul George is shooting it confidently. I'm actually happy to see Paul George apparently be out of his head and playing confidently and freely because he's a fantastic talent when he does. And Marcus Morris Sr. was hitting threes. So this was the type of performance that we were expecting to see. And again, it's not just that the Mavericks shot particularly well in the first two games in LA. That wasn't the only difference why they won. It's not like the Clippers played the exact same way at home as they did on the road. The Mavericks just shot better, so the results were different. No, the difference is the mindset that each team had coming into this ball game and coming into the games on the road versus at home. The Clippers came in with a desperation on the road. The Mavericks couldn't match it, couldn't match that level of intensity at all. And Luka Doncic, listen, I give him a lot of credit for battling through that nerve issue in his neck. It almost stings. There's a pulsating kind of feel to it, pulsating pain that just kind of trickles through your entire neck into your body. And the fact that he was able to battle through and give out the type of production he gave out of 19 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, it's fantastic. I mean, in this entire series, he's torched the Clippers, averaging 38 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists through the first 3 games of the postseason against the Clippers. So I'm never going to question the heart or the talent of Luka Doncic. Although the only thing that is mind-boggling to me is how atrocious he is at the free throw line. I cannot seem to pinpoint why the guy goes 0 for 5 from the free throw line, shooting 60% from the free throw line this series. And yet he'll back down Kawhi Leonard, hit a tough step back fall away, and just swish it over him from 17 feet out. But an uncontested free throw where it's just you at the line with no defender in your face, you can't make that. And I love Luka Doncic. That is the only blemish and flaw in his game. That's it. That's it. Just make the free throws, and this game totally feels differently. There were about 3 3-point play opportunities for Luka Doncic if he could make the free throw, and he couldn't. I'm not saying that in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the entirety of the game, yes, the Mavericks lost by 25. I'm not saying that if Luka Doncic makes 4 out of those 5 free throws, they're going to win the game. But they came at timely spots in the ball game where the momentum was fickle and very ephemeral for both teams and both sides. And you have a guy in Luka where, okay, if you convert that 3-point play, now the fans are really engaged. It came down to, and I don't say this as a slight to Boban Marjanovic. I love Boban Marjanovic. Rick Carlisle needed to insert Boban Marjanovic into the ballgame to try and excite the fans, to try and get the building some juice, some energy. It had nothing to do with strategics, even though he did play pretty well, and he's always going to have the height advantage, and he's a character. Everyone loves him. There's nothing negative you can say about Boban Marjanovic, but that's what it came down to. Rick Carlisle literally believed the best chance for the Dallas Mavericks to win Game 4 because of the lack of energy that they came out with was to insert Boban Marjanovic into the series, a series in which he has not made any appearances up until this point. Barely played throughout the entire season. And that's what it came down to. So This is why this Clippers team baffles me, because this was the team we expected to see. Now we go into game 5. The Clippers are favored, and they should be favored. But what type of team are we going to get? And that's the question. Are we going to get the same Clippers team that showed up in games 1 and 2 or games 3 and 4? Are the Mavericks going to shoot as poorly in game 4 as they did? Or are they going to shoot as poorly in game 4 rather than shoot blistering hot in the first 2 games? What type of Mavericks team will we get? And the interesting thing, the more I've been watching these two teams, the more I'm realizing that their strengths are exactly the same in this instance. Whichever team shoots better from the three-point line wins the game. Games 1 and 2. Mavericks shot better from the three-point line. It wasn't just because Luka Doncic was going off. Games 3 and 4. The Clippers absolutely shot better from the three-point line. So we'll see what happens in game 5. And the Mavericks obviously try to involve Kristaps Porzingis. They tried to get him the ball early, and he got it going early. And that was a big height advantage and big advantage. But Porzingis is at his most effective when the shooters around him can actually spot up and hit shots. If the shooters around him aren't hitting shots, Kristaps Porzingis is still effective, but not nearly to the same degree. So the Clippers, listen, they showed a lot of backbone, a lot of fight, a lot of mental fortitude that we hadn't seen yet from them. And that should be commended. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. But, of course, the natural question comes up, which is, will that type of performance be summoned back at home in game 5? And I don't know. I truly don't know. I want to say yes, it should. But they saved their season. They saved their season. They saved their iteration of this Clippers team as we know it, because it would have been utterly calamitous if they were to have lost one of these games, or worse, gone swept. They would have absolutely imploded if they lost game 3. They were trailing 30-11. They came back and won that game. That was huge for them. So it's going to set up a really fascinating game 5 that I absolutely cannot wait for. Transitioning to the Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics and the Brooklyn Nets. Game 4 was yesterday at TD Garden. And I know that most of the headlines will revolve around the incident involving Kyrie Irving and the water bottle thrown at him from a fan. And it was first of all, it was just disgraceful to see that. And I'm glad that he was charged with assault and battery with a weapon and likely will receive a lifetime ban. And because that's just intolerable. Should not be tolerated, and I'm glad to see that they address that. But I don't want this game, and unfortunately it probably will be marred by that incident and stained because of that incident. But that's a shame, because this was one of the most entertaining and mesmerizing offensive performances that I've seen in the postseason. I mean, this Brooklyn Nets team, just their offense looked absolutely immaculate. It was absolutely sensational. KD dropped 42 points. Silky smooth jumpers, just effortless. Literally, he would get the ball without dribbling. He would just face up a defender from the elbow and just rise up over him and knock down the jumper. He didn't even have to put the ball on the floor. He drops 42. Kyrie was just mocking almost and toying with the Celtics players, putting that ball in a yo-yo string. His dribbling display was exquisite. He drops 39 points. He was in his bag yesterday. The best ball handler that I've ever seen in the NBA so far. James Harden chimes in with a meager 23 points and a career-high 18 assists. The big three for the Boston Celtics dropped 104 points yesterday. 104 points. Joe Harris even chipped in with 14 points on 4 or 5 shooting from the three-point line. And his shots, as much as we rave about the shooting prowess and this prolific offense of the Nets and how great of jump shooters KD, Kyrie, James Harden are, Joe Harris's jump shots and his three-pointers literally were nothing but net. And that was no pun intended. He was literally nothing but nets the entire game. Not a single three-pointer that he made, I think, hit the rim. No rattle it in. They were perfect, pristine jump shots that he was knocking down. And so the only downside, if you're the Nets, and again, this was the third time this year that they've eclipsed the 140-point mark. But this is the only downside is that they needed, Steve Nash needed to play James Harden, KD, and Kyrie those extensive minutes to try and get them more run so they get more comfortable with one another. That was the only downside to the game yesterday for the Brooklyn Nets, was the need to keep those guys in there just to continue to try and develop a little bit more chemistry and continuity in this postseason. That's the only downside. And we know how prolific they are on offense, and this team is truly a juggernaut. And I know that this superlative has been used loosely and lightly, sometimes inappropriately, to describe other teams to a certain degree. And it's been kind of out of context used to describe other teams as a juggernaut. This team is truly a juggernaut. This team is truly lethal from everywhere on the court at all times. I think sometimes we kind of overuse, and it becomes a little hackneyed when we use a juggernaut to describe a pretty good and efficient offense. But this is a truly good and a truly prolific offense that we're seeing. But the main takeaway for me, obviously the Nets are fantastic, but the biggest takeaway for me watching that game yesterday was just how badly I felt for Jason Tatum. Man, I feel badly for Jason Tatum out there. It was so sad to watch Jason Tatum fight, compete in these games, in this series, and have close to nothing to show for it. He is so overmatched in this game, and it's not his fault at all. It's none of his doing. It's such a shame, because here you have a guy in Jason Tatum who drops 40 points yesterday. I'm sure you didn't even know that when you looked at the box score. Jason Tatum drops 40 points yesterday. He's efficient shooting the basketball, 10 of 22. He's being double teamed on most plays, most possessions. 17 of 17 from the free throw line, 3 of 7 from the three-point line, even added 2 blocks on the defensive side of the ball. And they still get blown out. 40 points and they get blown out. And then to make matters worse, right before tip, it's reported that Kemba Walker's not playing. Robert Williams, who is their defensive anchor in the middle, he's a no-go. You already are without Jaylen Brown. And it literally took a 50-point performance in Game 3 for the Boston Celtics to eke out a win versus the Brooklyn Nets. Jason Tatum needed to drop 50 points and needed Kemba Walker just to play. Kemba Walker just scored 6 points in that game, but they needed just his mere presence and a 50-point burger from Jason Tatum just to eke out a win at home. That's what Jason Tatum's doing. And again, I'm a Lakers fan, and I'm complimenting a Boston Celtics saying, I feel badly, I have sympathy for Jason Tatum. That's what it's come down to. And so this series was never supposed to be Jason Tatum versus the big three of Brooklyn. This was supposed to be the Nets' big three of KD, Kyrie, and Harden taking on the Celtics' big three of Tatum, Brown, and Kemba Walker. Now, again, whether or not you believe the Celtics' big three had a chance against the Nets' big three, that's irrelevant here. The reality is this has turned into not only a David versus Goliath, this has turned into David without an arm and a bruised knee. against Goliath because it takes 50 points just to barely secure a win. 40 points does absolutely nothing. 40 points does absolutely nothing if you're Jason Tatum. Nothing. Didn't do anything. It wasn't even that close. The entire game was over by the second quarter. And all I could think about watching that game was just tremendous sympathy. Because this guy, he already was respected by the Brooklyn Nets. But he has earned so much respect from the Brooklyn Nets. I know they won't say anything right now. They're waiting till the end of this series, and they'll close out the Celtics in Game 5 at home. But when this series is over, they're going to dap up this man and say, hey, I'm actually sorry for you, bro, that you had to do this by yourself. You're a transcendent player, just an incredible player. Because Jason Tatum, what he was doing in this series, and especially over the last 2 games, I mean, this was like his 4th time scoring 50 points in the last month. That's how good this guy has been. And so this guy, he's arrived. We've talked about it before. Jason Tatum has arrived, and he's been ascending. And I think if anything else, what we've seen and what he's shown is that he is more than capable of being your number 1 scoring option on a championship team. That's paying high respects, because I think the level of respect that people in the NBA and the Nets have had for him and have for him now has been elevated, has been heightened, has been raised. He's just a ridiculous player, and it's a shame that he hasn't had his horses to go into battle with, to ride beside him, because the Nets, I still think the Nets would have won regardless, but this has just been an uneven fist fight and matchup going into the ring. So we'll see what happens. The other big game that took place yesterday is an earlier start time, so maybe not everyone got a chance to see it. The Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. Atlanta Hawks dismantled the Knicks yesterday, 113-96. And here's what we always knew. We knew that going into this postseason, the Knicks had been the most surprising team in the NBA. This has been just an incredible story. A team that finished as the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. We had our doubts about them, let alone not only finishing as the 4th seed, but even making the playoffs. Most people didn't even have them making the playoffs at all. And despite all that, the reality is this: the New York Knicks just aren't a good basketball team. They really aren't. And that's not meant to be an insult. They rely solely on their grit and their toughness. And I love the rejuvenation of Derrick Rose at age 32, playing like his pre-ACL days in Chicago, his pre-ACL and MVP days in Chicago in 2011. I mean, Derrick Rose this postseason has been the most consistent and, quite frankly, the best player for the New York Knicks this postseason, averaging 24 points a game. Julius Randle has been a tremendous story. He used to be a Laker. Happy for him and he deserved to win the NBA's most improved player, but he's been a shell of himself this postseason. Regular season, averaged 24 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, but more importantly, shot at 46.5% from the floor, 41% from the three-point line. This postseason, he's averaging a hair under 15 points per game. Yes, he's averaging 12 rebounds, which is a couple ticks up, but 3 assists. But this is the staggering stat. He's shooting an abysmal 24% from the floor and 31% from the three-point line. And unfortunately, that's really been the difference in the series, because this team, unfortunately, is kind of like a washed-up version of the 2011 Bulls. You have Derrick Rose, Taj Gibson, Tom Thibodeau. I mean, and you look at, and it's no knock on that team because they reached the Eastern Conference Finals. But you look at this New York Knicks team, you're spearheaded by Rose, Randall, a second-year player in R.J. Barrett, a rookie in Emmanuel Quickley, an aged Taj Gibson that still brings fight, and Alec Burks, who I thought used to be in Utah And now he's with the Knicks, and I like Alec Burks. I always loved Alec Burks. But this team shouldn't have made the playoffs. But they did. To their credit, they did make the postseason. But the Atlanta Hawks are by far the superior team. It is not even close. And what's exacerbated the issue and has highlighted the large gap in the disparity between both these teams is the star play. Trae Young has been playing like a star and has emerged as a superstar in this postseason. And Julius Randle has unfortunately kind of been reduced down to who he was maybe in the first couple years in the league. Trae Young's averaging 28 points per game. Randle, again, a little bit below 15 points per game. And the Hawks have been able to shoot it so much better. I mean, the Knicks can't buy a bucket on the road. The Atlanta Hawks shot 38.5% from the three-point line yesterday. The Knicks shot 31%. You have Danilo Gallinari contributing with 21 points. John Collins with his best game of the postseason of 22. Again, Trae Young with 28. Bogdanovich was big with 4 or 5, 4 3-pointers for the Atlanta Hawks. Kevin Huerter came in and chipped in 3 of 5 from the three-point line. So the shooting display is just so much better, head and shoulders better for the Atlanta Hawks than it is for the New York Knicks. And that's been the difference. One team has been able to shoot, and their star has played like a star in the Atlanta Hawks. The other team can't shoot, and their star continues to struggle in Julius Randle and the Knicks. And this has kind of been their calling cards all season. The Atlanta Hawks, what were they known for? Their offense. They couldn't defend a lick in the regular season. Well, they're starting to defend a little bit better. The New York Knicks, what were they known for all season? Their defense. And they haven't been able to defend as well, and their offense has been struggling. Their best player has not been playing well. I don't care what the stats say yesterday. Yes, Randle had 23, 10, and 7, but 7 of 19 from the floor. This was not the same type of efficient game that he's had that we're accustomed to seeing. And the biggest concern, the biggest reservation that I have is I don't think the New York Knicks can win a game on the road this postseason. I think that they'll come back to the Garden, which, by the way, has just been the best venue in the postseason this year. I mean, the electricity and the juice and the energy that's been shown in that building has been unrivaled, in my opinion, this postseason in any other arena. Maybe the Phoenix Suns was close. They've had a lot of energy in that building. But Madison Square Garden has just been the ultimate atmosphere to play, and tremendous credit to that fan base for showing up and showing out because their Knicks needed it. And I think that ultimately they'll muster up the courage and they'll take game 5 at home for that crowd. But I don't see them going down to the ATL and collecting a win. I don't see them being able to transfer that consistency at home, that energy from home, and insert it on the road. I just don't see them being able to win another game on the road. And I think the Atlanta Hawks will probably close this out in 6. And again, I thought the Knicks would initially win in 7 because they could rely on their defense and because of that grit and that toughness and the fact that they had home court. I wasn't sure if the Atlanta Hawks could win a game on the road. I figured every team would probably win at home. And that obviously hasn't been the case. And I think that Atlanta now, they've just played like the better team. They should have won game 2 in New York. They blew a lead there. And then obviously they destroyed the Knicks in games 3 and 4. So, I mean, the Knicks offense just has looked anemic without Randle playing really well. I mean, Derrick Rose again is the only guy to provide some type of spark for him. So they're going to need a lot more than just that if they want to actually make some noise and extend this series. They're going to need much more than that. So it sets up for me, I think, a big question mark now, sticking with the Western Conference with the Lakers and Clippers, which is both of these teams are tied 2-2. Now the Clippers have home court, Lakers don't. So which game 5 is more important, to the Lakers or to the Clippers? I think that this is a really intriguing question. I think that there are so many different ways that you can take this argument and you can discuss this and explicate. But for me, Game 5 to me is much more important to the Los Angeles Lakers than the LA Clippers. And I'll tell you why. The Lakers, first of all, have been dealt the injury bug. And not only have they been dealt the injury bug, but they've been dealt that to their star player in Anthony Davis. And really their stars, because again, LeBron James is still recovering from that high ankle sprain. The Clippers, I mean, the Phoenix Suns, yes, they've been hampered a little bit by CP3, but they haven't sustained any injuries to any of their other players. That's never been a discussion or focal point or even a big concern for this team throughout the entire season, and even this postseason. CP3's been injured, yes, but it's not like Devin Booker's been injured. It's not like DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson and those boys are injured or playing through injuries. The Clippers, meanwhile, their two stars, yes, they've been missing Serge Ibaka, but Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are perfectly healthy. Those two guys have been playing, and they've been the catalyst for this team winning games. That's not the issue. And so now you have Anthony Davis for the Lakers, who's likely going to miss Game 5 with the grade 1 groin strain. KCP missed all of Game 4 after hyperextending his leg in Game 3. And again, LeBron's still recovering from his own ankle injury. And then the Lakers are trying to get healthier faster. And the reason, to me, again, why Game 5 is so important is because you don't want to extend this series more than you have to. Unfortunately, they couldn't close in Game 4 and take a commanding 3-1 lead. And give credit to the Phoenix Suns. But when you've got lingering injuries, the last thing you want to do is extend the series and have to play another game in a Game 7. Because if the Lakers lose Game 5, then going home is only required to tie the series. Then you got to go back to Phoenix. That's the other thing. Phoenix has home court, so at least potentially 2 of the next 3 games in this best of 3 is going to be played in Phoenix, which is a major, major advantage for the Phoenix Suns. Major advantage for Phoenix Suns. So the Lakers are trying to end this series quick, fast, and in a hurry. And juxtapose that, you have the Clippers, who have just showed you that they can go on the road into Dallas and win 2 straight games. And now you've got the last 3 games, 2 of the next 3 games potentially in your building at home. The Clippers have home court. Now, again, what type of team we'll see in LA, I'm not sure. But they've at least showed us that they can win on the road with their backs against the wall, with pressure just pouring down, just cascading down. They've proven that they can win on the road. The Clippers have. And yes, the Lakers have too, but that's a tall order. It's a tall ask if you lose Game 5 to have to go back to Phoenix potentially for a Game 7 to win on the road. And so I think that the Lakers, it's imperative for me that they win game 5 because, again, the Clippers just showed they can beat Dallas on the road. And their season and their franchise in its current iteration, in its current form, was hanging in the balance, was on the line in these 2 games. And as of the first 4 games, they have come out with flying colors as of right now. Again, we'll see what type of team they are in Game 5, but you factor in the momentum going on the road for the Lakers versus the Clippers, just 1-2 straight coming back home. So the momentum is with the Phoenix Suns, and you have to be able to quash that if you're the Lakers, as opposed to breathe new life into that. And the other thing is, the Clippers' best opponent in the Dallas Mavericks, their best player is Luka Doncic. He's hurt now, dealing with a neck issue, a nerve issue in his neck. That's going to significantly hinder and impede their ability to be effective offensively. Luka Doncic is the Dallas Mavericks' solar system. He is their offense. He is their success. And he's a little bit limited. And finally, the Lakers are playing a feisty and a hungry Phoenix Suns team that isn't scared of them. This Phoenix Suns team, whether or not they're as good as the Lakers, which I don't believe they are, they're not afraid of the Lakers. Cameron Payne has stepped in and he's induced a lot of pain. He's delivered a lot of pain to the Lakers. I apologize for that terrible pun. I'm sure it's been overused all the time, but he's not afraid of the moment. Cameron Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Devin Booker is a baller. He's a dog. I don't care what the shooting percentages is. If you're asking me, is Devin Booker scared of a game 7 or a game against the Lakers? No. Jay Crowder, yes, he looks incredibly small and weak when he tries to puff his chest against LeBron, and I don't know why Jay Crowder over and over again has had the audacity to try and challenge LeBron James when LeBron has literally sent his you-know-what packing home in about 6 different playoff series for about 6 different teams. But the reality is he's not actually scared of LeBron. He's not scared of LeBron. DeAndre Ayton has come out of his shell. And then you have CP3. So this team is not scared of the Lakers. And I'm not saying the Mavericks are scared of the Clippers at all, but I'm just saying that the role players and the supporting cast, the Phoenix Suns are a better overall team than the Dallas Mavericks. They're a much deeper team. So to me, I think Game 5 is much more imperative that the Lakers take care of business in Game 5 versus the Clippers. But again, Lakers play Tuesday night, Clippers play Wednesday night. So we'll see what happens. We have to wait and see for a couple of days. But I cannot wait to see. This is monumental for both of these teams. Absolutely monumental for both of these teams. Okay, I want to transition now for the final 10 minutes or so to the NFL. This Julio Jones sweepstakes and really just this story in general has been really fascinating to me because we know, and Atlanta, first of all, I love this headline. I absolutely love this headline. Atlanta comes out and says that they are willing to trade Julio Jones for less. They're willing to accept, they said, accept a hard second-round draft pick for Julio Jones, the Pro Bowl wide receiver. So we know that Julio Jones has approached the Atlanta Falcons months ago to request a trade. They wanted to take care of this behind closed doors. And then, of course, last week on the televised show Undisputed on FS1, Julio Jones, probably unintentionally, I don't know if he knew he was on live television and on air, unintentionally revealed, yeah, I'm out of there. I'm not going back to Atlanta, the Atlanta Falcons. So that's what we knew. And unfortunately for the Atlanta Falcons, any potential leverage that they may have had in negotiations, they completely lost now. They know that. And they've had to accept the fact that that's the reality. The cat's out of the bag. It's not a secret anymore. You can't operate in a cloak and dagger manner anymore. It's out there. Teams know. And the Atlanta Falcons understand that, which is why they're coming out and making this expected and unsurprising remark. You know what? We are now, I think, willing to accept less. Yeah, you don't have a choice. Every team knows that you have a distressed asset and that distressed asset can be bought on the cheap. That's what we know. And the Atlanta Falcons understand that too. But this is the consequence. Because the thing is, the Atlanta Falcons, prior to this information getting leaked and getting out there, it wasn't a guarantee that they were going to trade Julio Jones, or at least to the general public and to other teams. There was still the possibility. It was just a possibility that they would trade him. It was still a possibility he could return with the team. And so teams had their suspicions about the Falcons given their cap situation and that they would have benefited from offloading that contract. But it wasn't a done deal and a guarantee that he was for sure going to be dealt. But this is the problem if you're the Atlanta Falcons. How can you bring Julio Jones back into that locker room after what he's just said? because now the relationship that he has with a bunch of those players is fractured. And he has made it clear that he wants out of this team. And yes, I know that a lot of the vets on the team understand his position and can appreciate his position, and they won't hold a gripe against him for having this position. They respect the hell out of Julio Jones, what he's meant as a football player, what he's meant to the NFL, what he's meant most importantly to the Atlanta Falcons organization. And they can respect the fact that he wants out. But I don't know if they're necessarily going to all of a sudden embrace him with open arms if he's trying to return back to the team. I mean, what type of relationship will he and Matt Ryan have if he was to return back to that locker room? That's kind of the natural question. So to me, it would almost feel a little off-putting if Julio Jones returns, which is hence the impetus behind the Atlanta Falcons trying to trade him. So then it brings up another interesting story, another interesting rumor that came out yesterday, which is that the Seattle Seahawks have now emerged as a potential trade destination, and they've actually been in discussions with the Atlanta Falcons for Julio Jones. The fact that Russell Wilson and Julio Jones have actually been have been discussing a potential trade and playing together. Now, Seattle, listen, they kind of boast a talented wide receiving core. You already have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who both amassed over 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards receiving last year together. So is wide receiver their most important need? Not really. The question is whether a move like this would catapult them to being the favorites in the NFC. And to me, while there's no question this would be a huge addition to the Seattle Seahawks, of course it would their offense would be absolutely explosive in the passing game, but all that this would do is fortify and buttress their standing in the NFC. And to me, even before this trade, they were a top 5 team in the NFC. And I think that you have the Bucks, and this is in no particular order, but you have the Tampa Bay Bucks, the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Packers, the Seahawks, and the 49ers. Now, to me, I always had the Seahawks as the 4th best team in the NFC, even prior to these rumors, ahead of the 49ers, just because of the question marks surrounding their quarterback position. And to me, if they were to sign Julio Jones, all this would do is just strengthen and, again, solidify their position as the 4th best team in the NFC. I still would take the Bucks, the Rams, and the Packers over them. Because what's been the biggest deficiency for the Seahawks? It's been their defense. Yes, they added Carlos Dunlap, and he's been a game changer as far as creating pressure and sacking opposing quarterbacks. He's been a major addition. Obviously, you pair him with a healthy Jamal Adams, and this is a different Seattle Seahawks defense. But that's been their biggest area of need. And this was an offense that, again, what was about middle of the pack. But if you really evaluate why did this team start to struggle, it's because their defense wasn't good. Why did they lose 30-20 to the Rams in the NFC wildcard game? It's a combination of Russell Wilson just happened to play one of the worst performances of his career in the postseason, had a 16 QBR, and the defense wasn't good. If you add Julio Jones, you're just kind of strengthening a strength. I mean, look at the Atlanta Falcons as the perfect example. Who were they last year? They were a top 5 passing attack in the NFL last year, and what did it lead to? It led to a 4-12 record. It's their defense that was atrocious. It's their defense that let them down and why they lost a bunch of these games. They couldn't get stops. And they gave up over 40 points to the Dallas Mavericks. They lost to the Detroit Lions because they gave up a game-winning drive. The defense was the biggest issue, not to mention if you're the Seahawks and you really want to try and improve your offense, you should probably improve your running game, because it was the running game that if the running game got going, then that's what opens up the pass attack for Russell Wilson. If you're really trying to address an area of need on the offensive side, it's actually the run game. Like if the Seattle Seahawks could get their hands on a Christian McCaffrey or an Alvin Kamara, for example, okay, now you got something. That's gonna move the needle a bit for the Seattle Seahawks. But Julio Jones, to me, it just fortifies their position as a legitimate top 4 team in the NFC. Without him, they're still a top 4 team, in my opinion. So it's not necessary, but again, it's possible that adding him could have a major effect. It would certainly take him away from another contender in the NFC or a team in potentially the way of the Seattle Seahawks. But is it absolutely imperative that they get him and absolutely critical and vital? I don't know about that. Okay. Final topic of the day, Malkin's moments. Again, one of my just favorite topics. We have a couple great Malkin's moments for you this week. So Chelsea men's club, the professional soccer team in the Premier League, they won the Champions League final, beating Manchester City 1-0 in the second leg yesterday. The Blues took home their second Champions League title. And again, we obviously know that the women's Chelsea Soccer Club team reached the Champions League final as well. That had never been done for both the women's and the men's team to reach the finals in the Champions League. And a major shout out to Chelsea, and a big shout out to my friend Kyle Margolis, who's a huge Chelsea fan and supporter as well. That's a major win for their club. Trae Young scored 27 points and 9 assists yesterday, but the reason why it's significant is because now he joins Steph Curry, Kevin Johnson, and Oscar Robertson as the only players in NBA history to average 25 points and 10 assists through their first 4 games of the postseason. Major shout out to Trae, who's been starting to come out of his shell and into his own, kind of out of this cocoon. And now he's a butterfly sprouting those wings. He's been playing well. And the Hawks have won 13 consecutive home games dating back to the regular season, which is the longest active streak in the NBA. They're actually 21-2 over their last 23 games at State Farm Arena. That is a huge advantage when you can win at home, and especially at that type of rate. Then in the MLB, Albert Pujols, major shout out to the Dodger, hit his 670th home run yesterday, and even now surpassed Babe Ruth for 4th most extra bases hit in MLB history. A major shout out to Albert Pujols, who has actually surprisingly been a kind of nice addition offensively, a nice piece for the Dodgers unexpectedly. Prior to these games, prior to them losing to the Giants in 3 of their last 4 games, they hadn't lost a game with Albert Pujols since he has signed with the team. That's how dominant they had been. Or maybe they lost one time to the Houston Astros. Prior to that, though, they'd been absolutely on a tear, winning about 9 of their last 10 games with Albert Pujols in the lineup. So he's been fantastic. Then shout out to Julio Castroneves, who won the Indianapolis 500 for a record-tying 4th time. Major shout out to him, and major shout out to Kyle Larson, who gives Hendrick Motorsports a record-breaking 269th win. So they won at the Coca-Cola 600 yesterday, and that was a record-setting 269th win for Hendrick Motorsports. They passed Petty Enterprises with that win, so major shout-out to their organization. Well, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me every single Monday and Wednesday morning right here. You've been watching and listening to Morning Joe on Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_. And as always, have a lovely rest of your Monday morning and happy rest of your Memorial's Day as well.